Hydril Company pioneered the development of hydraulically actuated blowout prevention equipment over 45 years ago. Their effectiveness, reliability, and simple operation have earned the respect of the entire petroleum industry. Now, drawing from this experience, Hydril developed the Type V and Type X ram blowout preventers. The BOP is an integral part of any drilling operation, and a piece of equipment that can keep your rig intact, preserve the well, and it can save your life. This training module will acquaint you with the operation and maintenance of the Hydril Ram type BOPs. When you've completed this course, you'll know the purpose of the Hydril Ram blowout preventers, how and why it operates, how to maintain it in a condition that will enable you to perform your job more safely. You'll use two training tools in the course, this program and your workbook. The function of a ram BOP is to seal off the well bore by closing two steel rams with rubber seals that fit around the drill pipe. These rams will contain the pressures from a kick situation in the well bore, thus preventing a blowout. If there's no pipe in the well bore, the ram BOP should be equipped with blind rams. The rams are opened and closed by hydraulic pressures applied to the individual ram operators on each side of the BOP. As hydraulic closing pressure is applied, hydraulic fluid flows into the body through the fluid hinge and into the closing chamber. The rams slide forward until the closing front packers contact the pipe and mating ram. With closing pressure, the rubber in the front packer is squeezed around the pipe to form a seal. As the front packer is sealing around the pipe, the upper seal is being compressed against the upper seal seat to completely seal off the BOP body. The seal body then contains the wellbore pressure. When opening pressure is applied, hydraulic fluid travels into the body through the fluid hinge and into the opening chamber. The piston retracts the ram, and the upper seal and front packer are disengaged from the pipe. It's important to note that a ram-type BOP seals off only on the size pipe that its rams are designed for. Now, each time the pipe diameter is changed, the rams must be changed also. In case of hydraulic failure, the Hydril Ram BOP can be closed and locked by using the manual lock feature. To do so, attach a hand crank to the square end of the mechanical lock rod that extends from the cylinder. Rotate it clockwise until the ram is completely closed. Then, do the same thing to the other side. Once the manual lock has been set, it must be manually unlocked before the hydraulic system can move the pistons to open the rams. No ram BOP can be manually opened. You must apply hydraulic opening pressure. The Hydril Ram was designed to be maintained with standard rig tools. No special equipment is required for repair or maintenance. All wrench sizes, bolt torques, and lifting eye data are contained in your workbook. The Ram BOP may be operated with any oil field accumulator system of sufficient volume and pressure capacity, such as this ValveCon unit. Fluid volumes and operating pressures for the Ram BOP are found in your workbook. Any clean, light petroleum hydraulic oil will serve as the hydraulic fluid. Fresh water mixed with soluble oil may also be used. When using a water-oil mixture in temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, you should add antifreeze to the hydraulic system. Do not use synthetic fluids or fuel oil, since they will damage the BOP seals. The hydraulic control lines are connected to the NPT threaded ports on the hinge side of the BOP. The hydraulic line should be kept as straight as possible and should be large enough to supply sufficient flow at the required working pressure. The operating chambers and seals are rated for 1500 psi continuous operation, although normal operating pressures are below that. The Ram BOP can be operated at up to 3000 psi if required, and has been tested to 4500 psi. In order to fulfill its operating functions, the Ram BOP has to be properly maintained. To simplify your study of the maintenance procedures, it's helpful to consider the Ram BOP as divided into 5 main components: the cylinder assembly, the fluid hinge assembly, the bonnet assembly, the upper seal seat assembly, and the ram assembly.
After the ram BOP is disassembled into these 5 main components, you can then look at the further disassembly, inspection, and maintenance of each component in turn. You'll be able to use the information in your workbook to clarify each procedure.
The first step in disassembly of the Hydril Ram BOP is to open the rams completely. If the rams are not fully retracted, damage can result to the ram, bonnets, and BOP body when the bonnets are opened. The next step is to rotate the mechanical lock about 1/2 turn. Now begin on the hinge side of the door and loosen and disengage each bolt. New BOPs have bonnet bolt retaining rings to prevent the bolts from falling out of the bonnet. If you don't have them on your unit, it's a good idea to install them. To swing the bonnet open, you may need to insert a breaker bar in the hole opposite the door hinge.
Open only one bonnet at a time. If you must open both doors, be sure that the BOP is flanged to a wellhead or a secured test stump. If it's necessary to open both bonnets on an unsecured BOP, be sure to place blocks under each bonnet.
With the bonnet open, apply closing pressure to the BOP to extend the ram block fully. Then, screw an eye bolt in the hole provided in the ram assembly and lift it straight up. The back side of the ram is slotted and should lift free easily. If needed, the ram guide pins can be removed at this time. In the Hydril Ram BOP, the upper seal seat area is a replaceable metal part. The seat is held in place by a lock ring expanded into a groove in the body. To replace the upper seal seat, you must have both bonnets open. Remove the 4-socket head set screws, which allows the locking ring to retract into its groove in the seat. The seat is then pried downward and removed through the ram cavity. If it's necessary to apply force to remove the seat, be careful not to damage the BOP body. Don't worry about the old seal seat. You're going to throw it away anyway. Close the bonnet and make up one of the bonnet bolts on the side away from the hinge. Now, this can be done just hand tight, since the purpose of closing the bonnet is to stabilize it during removal of the cylinder assembly. You've now completed removal of the ram assembly and the upper seal seat assembly. To remove the cylinder assembly, you should begin by removing each of the hex head nuts on the cylinder. Then place a sling under the cylinder and apply a slight lift. Next, pry the cylinder away from the bonnet by placing a screwdriver between the cylinder and the bonnet.
If it'll not come loose, apply slight opening pressure with a hydraulic unit. Now, this light pressure will break the seal and release the cylinder. And don't worry about losing some hydraulic fluid here.
After the cylinder has been set aside, place the sling around the cylinder liner and apply a small amount of tension. Release the liner by prying it free of the body. The piston in the cylinder liner will now slide free of the body. Place them on a workbench. You have now removed all of the parts of the cylinder assembly. Next is the fluid hinge assembly. The fluid hinge contains all of the seals concerned with the transfer of hydraulic opening fluid from the body to the bonnet and back. To remove it from the BOP, take out the hex head pipe plugs on the fluid hinge. Turn the set screws located beneath the pipe plugs clockwise until they bottom snugly. This locks the spring-loaded fluid hinge sub and sub-energizer in place. Late model Ram BOPs do not require these locking set screws. Remove the two hex head cap screws that hold the fluid hinge to the body. Slip the fluid hinge assembly from between the bonnet hinges. Now you're ready for the bonnet assembly. Insert two lifting eye bolts in the holes provided in the top of the bonnet. The eye bolts are for the bonnet only. Attach a hoist.
Remember, the lifting device must be capable of supporting the bonnet weight and allow for movement of the bonnet to clear the load hinges.
Undo the bonnet bolt holding the door closed and apply a bit of lift to the bonnet. Rotate the hinge pin set screws counterclockwise at least 5 turns. In newer model BOPs, these set screws have been eliminated. Now, the hinge pins can be unscrewed and removed. In the double ram configuration, the pins cannot be removed with the bonnet in place. Remove the bonnet assembly by sliding it clear of the load hinges. Set it aside on a workbench. You've now disassembled the Ram BOP into its 5 component assemblies. Before proceeding to the maintenance procedure for each of these components, return to your workbook and read the material presented in Part 1. This is the end of Video Part 1 of the Hydril Ram BOP training module. Video Part 2 will follow on this tape in 10 seconds.
Now you're ready to complete the maintenance procedure for the cylinder assembly.
Start by removing the piston from the cylinder liner by placing a bolt through the hole in the square end of the mechanical lock and attaching a sling. Then, lift the entire assembly and lower it onto 2x4s so that they can contact the outer edge of the cylinder liner and still allow the piston to slide freely between them. The piston should now drop out of the cylinder liner. Remove the thrust washer and inspect it for wear. Next, unscrew the mechanical lock from the piston. It has a left-hand thread, so turn it clockwise. You have now disassembled the cylinder assembly. Now remove the piston seals and clean the seal grooves. Note that each seal is composed of an outer U-type seal with an inner O-ring that keeps the U part spread open. When replacing the seals, make sure that the seal on the piston rod side opens toward the shaft. And that the seal on the mechanical lock side opens toward the mechanical lock. When complete, cylinder seals should look like this. To remove the cylinder to the mechanical lock seal, first remove the spiral retaining ring. Next, remove the spacer ring then the seal. The rod scraper is located in the outside of the cylinder housing and can best be removed by working through the rod guard. It will be necessary to remove the metal retainer with a screwdriver or chisel. When removed, the components look like this. The last seal on the cylinder is the cylinder to bonnet O-ring, and it comes off easily. Before replacing any of these seals, be sure and clean and inspect the grooves. Replace the cylinder to bonnet seal. Now, install the cylinder to mechanical lock seal with the U facing toward the inside of the cylinder. Then, replace the spacer ring and finally the retainer ring. The retainer ring must slide inside the groove in the seal housing. When all the seals in the retainer ring are in place, it should look like this. The rod scraper is supplied in one piece. Place it in the cylinder with the U portion of the scraper facing out. Tap it firmly into place by using a 2x4 or other instrument that will not damage the seal. Next, you should remove and replace the cylinder O-ring. Comes off easily, and after the surface is cleaned and inspected for wear, a new O-ring is installed. Now, place the cylinder liner inside the cylinder with the cylinder liner O-ring facing toward the flanged end. Install the mechanical lock shaft by screwing it into the piston with a counterclockwise rotation until it is hand tight. Slide the thrust washer over the mechanical lock shaft and after you have lubricated the seals, place the piston back into the cylinder assembly. This completes the maintenance procedure for the cylinder assembly. Now you're ready for the fluid hinge assembly. To disassemble the fluid hinge, begin by removing the two fluid hinge to body O-rings. For demonstration purposes, we'll remove only one side of the hinge. Next, place one hand over the sub and sub-energizer and remove the set screw. Newer model Ram BOPs have automatic sub and sub-energizer retainers. Now, remove the fluid hinge sub from the sub-energizer. Check the O-rings for wear. Disassembly is now complete and any needed part replacements can be made. To assemble the fluid hinge, begin by cleaning all machine surfaces. Next, install the sub-to-bonnet O-ring and place the fluid hinge sub in the sub-energizer. Now, install the spring in the hinge. Lubricate the sub and sub-energizer and place it in the hinge. Press it into the hinge and hold it while you install the set screw. Tighten the set screw to hold the sub in place. On our new design, the sub is automatically held in place without a set screw. clean the fluid hinge to body O-ring grooves and install the O-rings. That completes the maintenance procedure for the fluid hinge. Installation will be done with the bonnet in place.
Maintenance of the other fluid hinge sub and sub-energizer follows the same procedure.
Next, you're ready for the bonnet assembly. With the bonnet off the body, remove the 4 hex head cap screws and take off the load hinge. The bearing should slip out easily, and a tap on the hinge should knock out the thrust washer. Clean and inspect the hinge. Replace the washer and hinge pin bearing. The upper load hinge is then installed with the hinge pin bearing seat up. The lower hinge must have the opening down. Each hinge is fitted over the 2 locating pins on the BOP body and then secured with socket head cap screws. Tighten with a clockwise rotation. To remove and replace the bonnet seals, it's best to work with bonnet in place on the Ram BOP body. To help position the bonnet for assembly, add a sling under the cylinder flange. Slide the bonnet hinge over the load hinges on the BOP body and insert the upper and lower hinge pins. Before installing the hinge pins, replace the hinge pin O-rings. The bonnet is now positioned vertically by adjusting the hinge pin.
The idea is to position the bonnet so that the guide pin in the off-hinge bonnet face fits smoothly into its matching hole on the body when the bonnet is closed. Now this will align the bonnet bolts with the bonnet holes in the body.
The bonnet is raised by loosening the lower hinge pin and then tightening the upper hinge pin until alignment is achieved. Then, tighten the lower hinge pin until it's snug. Over-tightening will cause the thrust washers to bind, making bonnet swinging difficult. The bonnet is lowered by first loosening the upper hinge pin and then rotating the lower hinge pin counterclockwise when viewing the pin from the top of the BOP. Then, you tighten the upper pin. Finally, tighten the hinge pin set screws on both hinges. With the bonnet aligned and in place on the body, you can now remove and replace the bonnet seals. First, remove the bonnet to piston rod seal retaining ring by placing a screwdriver or seal tool under the edge of the retaining ring and pulling it free of the groove. Now, remove the spacer ring and the piston rod mud seal. These seals can also be removed with the piston rod in place. Next, remove the bonnet seal with a screwdriver or seal tool. The bonnet to piston rod seal is removed from the cylinder side of the bonnet. Next comes the plastic energizing ring. Now, clean and inspect and lubricate all seal and ring grooves. Then, install the plastic energizing ring and the bonnet to piston rod seal. The bonnet to piston rod seal is installed with the seal facing out toward the piston. Now, from the other side, the bonnet seal fits in place easily. Lubricate and install the bonnet to piston rod mud seal. The spacer ring, and the retaining ring.
You should now check the plastic energizing compound. This compound provides for an emergency seal in case the piston rod mud seal fails. Now, it should be replaced only if it's been used or the plastic packing is no longer pliable. The plastic energizing compound is normally used only on surface BOPs since it must be manually activated. Activation of this emergency seal is explained in your workbook.
The plastic packing assembly consists of a hex head pipe plug, a socket head set screw, the plastic packing compound, and a check valve. To replace the plastic packing, first remove the hex head pipe plug. Then the energizing set screw. insert the new plastic packing and install the energizing set screw so that it barely touches it. Next, install the pipe plug. You've now completed the maintenance procedure for the bonnet assembly and load hinge. Now we're ready to install the fluid hinge. Now be sure that the O-ring seals between the body and the fluid hinge are in place. Next, place the hinge between the load hinges and install the hex head cap screws. Be sure that the set screws have been backed out 2 or 3 turns after reassembly to the BOP body to release the subs in the hinge. Remember, the newer models don't have these set screws. Before proceeding to the maintenance procedures for the final 2 assemblies, return to your workbook and read the material in Part 2. This is the end of Video Part 2 of the Hydril Ram BOP training module. Video Part 3 will follow on this tape in 10 seconds. You are now ready for the maintenance procedure for the upper seal seat assembly. The O-rings and backup rings should be replaced first. Check your workbook for correct placement of the rings. A new lock ring is placed over the seal seat barrel. The seal seat is then fitted into position in the BOP body. Use care when replacing the seat so as to prevent bending the seat flange. The 4-socket head set screws are then screwed in, expanding the lock ring into its groove in the body, locking the upper seal seat in place. Use virgin set screws that are already coated. The coating makes them self-locking. This completes the maintenance procedures for the upper seal seat. You're now ready to look at the Ram assembly. It's the heart of the Hydril Ram BOP. The upper seal and the front packer in the ram assembly are two different pieces and can be replaced separately. To replace the ram seals, place a screwdriver between the upper seal and front packer and pry the seal upward out of its groove.
If the seal does not pop out, there are holes provided here and here in the bottom of the ram block through which a 3/8" rod can be pushed to get the seal out.
The front packer is removed by inserting a screwdriver behind the packer and pushing it out of the ram body. The word top is molded with raised lettering into the top of the front packer. The lubricated packer is inserted into the ram and worked in until it seats.
There will be approximately 3/8 inch of the packer extending beyond the front face of the ram when it's in the proper position.
With the pins of the upper seal pointing down, fit the upper seal into its groove. The pins of the upper seal fit into holes in the front packer.
If the pins of the seal do not go all the way into the front packer is probably upside down.
This same procedure applies to the seals and front packer on the other side of the BOP body.
As you complete your inspection and maintenance of the ram assembly, you'll be preparing the final reassembly of the BOP.
The sealing surfaces and areas on the bonnet and BOP body should be lubricated to prevent rust and corrosion. The bonnet bolt threads and shoulders should be lubricated with API 5A2 lubricant or its equivalent. Do not use tool joint compounds. The ram and body ram bore should be coated with a supplied rapeseed oil lubricant.
Now you're ready to fit the cylinder assembly to the bonnet.
Hoist the cylinder assembly into place and slide the piston rod through the bonnet so that the cylinder liner O-ring fits snugly into the bonnet. Replace the cylinder nuts and tighten them on alternating sides.
Visually inspect the body and ring grooves, horizontal side outlets, and ram bore for damage, wear, and pitting. Check both studs and nuts for proper types, sizes, and condition. Refer to your workbook or Section 2 of the Operator's Manual for this information. Check ring joint flange gasket grooves. Any doubtful grooves should be checked with a ring groove gauge.
Lower the ram onto the piston. Now, retract the ram. Finally, close the bonnet and make up the bonnet bolts with a clockwise rotation. Torque values are found in your workbook and in Section 2 of your Operator's Manual. It's important to properly torque each bonnet bolt to ensure an even seal during operation. This completes the maintenance procedures for the Hydril Ram BOP. You're now ready for testing.
There are several methods of testing the Hydril Ram to ensure that it is completely operable. First, be sure that all equipment that you connect to the BOP is rated for the same working pressure. To test the unit, hook up the closing hydraulic line and set a test plug in the well bore below the BOP.
If testing it with pipe rams, apply 1500 psi of closing pressure and check the hydraulic pressure gauge. If there's no pressure drop, there's no leak. If there is a pressure loss, first check all hydraulic support lines and equipment for leaks. If there are none, then check the BOP for any external leaks. After completing these checks, release the closing pressure and apply opening pressure and check that pressure gauge. Again, no pressure drop means no leaks. If there is a pressure loss, again check the hydraulic lines first. If they are secure, then check the BOP for external leaks. To check for ram packer leaks at low pressure, close the rams with 1500 psi operating pressure and apply wellbore pressure under the rams to 200 psi with the BOP test tool installed. Hold it for 3 minutes. Check for leaks. If the ram packer leaks, check it for worn packers and replace if necessary. Then increase wellbore pressure to the rated working pressure of the BOP. Again, check for leaks above the packer. Repeat this procedure for each set of pipe rams and blind rams.
According to the standards set in API RP 53, BOP field operating tests should be performed each round trip, but not more than once per day. To test with drill pipe in the hole, a drill pipe safety valve should be installed prior to the test. All lines to the BOP stack should be tested as previously described. If blind rams are in the stack, operate these rams when the drill string is out of the hole. Return all valves and BOPs to their original position and continue normal operations. After testing, be sure to record all test results. The hydraulic system should be pressure tested each time a well pressure test is made.
This is the end of video part 3 of the Hydril Ram BOP training module. Return to your workbook and read the material in part 3 of the workbook, and then complete the program verification.